got a speed panel for you, focusing on monetization with in-app bidding, which is being moderated by Eric of HyprMX, who I think is just joining now. Have we got you there, Eric?
Got it.
Hooray! And we'll just wait for some more people to join in. As before, if you've got any questions for the panel, do drop them into the Q&A. I will jump in and ask them towards the end of the discussion. Again, there's only about 20 minutes, just a quick panel, but I'm sure it will be very interesting, and I will leave you to it. Take it away, Eric.
All right, thank you very much. I am live from New York City. I want to thank everyone for joining us digitally in Helsinki for Pocket Gamer Connects. Today we've got a speed panel focused on the ins and outs of in-app bidding. I have a fantastic panel lined up, so I'm going to do a quick introduction. We're joined by Nate Barker from Kolibri Games. Give a wave, Nate. We've got John Boog-Scott from PeopleFun. Hey, John.
Hello.
And we've got Farhan Haq from SYBO Games. What's up, Farhan?
What's up, Eric? I'm the only one without the background. Didn't work out for me.
That's all right. We've all got to stand out.
It obscured my face, so.
Well, let's kick this off with you, Farhan. So we're here to talk about in-app bidding. I want you to sort of set the stage. If we were to go back a year or two, it would be a very different place. So can you kind of give us some insight into what are some of the expectations or like the preconceived notions that you and a lot of developers probably have about in-app bidding?
In-app bidding's been around for a while, at least the conception of it. And there's more of the networks coming in to kind of move there, like for Facebook and Iron Source, AdColony. You kind of expect that with this kind of bidding model, you'd get basically higher ECPMs and less work without having to place in multiple instances. There's a kind of more true view of what the developers out there would pay for your traffic and a kind of better form of competition. Of course, it's taken longer than we expected, but we seem to be getting there slowly. Of course, many of the networks are not there yet with it, but running in-app bidding against multiple instances with other networks seems to be like kind of the hybrid model that people are going with up till now.
Right. And Nate, would you say sort of the same expectations, higher ECPMs? I mean, from a general standpoint, if everyone's having a chance to bid on every impression, that should give us some better competition.
Yeah, I think in general, I think the other thing that we were expecting is definitely more variety in the types of advertisers that we might see. So I think one challenge that a lot of developers face, particularly in monetization early on, is that they're looking at all of these options for partners that they can work with and generally decide like, okay, I've heard this name, I'm going to integrate this partner. And then you just get those particular ads who's ever running with that ad network. And so one of our expectations is that with in-app bidding, because it necessitates a competition, that we just get a little bit more diversity there from different networks and different partners advertising.
Right. Okay. And I mean, you fast forward now, like you said, not every network is bidding into a system, but it's a reality now. People are using in-app bidding, we're using hybrid setups. What does that process look like from the beginning, Nate, like from starting the setup?
Sure. So we had a waterfall setup in our game in Idle Miner Tycoon. And the process was, I think, a little clunky in the very beginning because you have to go to a lot of the partners that you already have, make sure that they understand that you're switching over to in-app bidding. From there, we set up, in some cases, like separate, separate publisher apps in each system so that they could differentiate between which one was in-app bidding, which one was still the waterfall. And then we constructed a hybrid. So with some partners, we began to immediately run a bidder. The bidder sat on top of the waterfall that we might have already had. And then with the other partners, we slowly migrated over from the waterfall to the bidder. Okay. So at the end, currently now we have both. We have this hybrid. So we have the waterfall, we have the bidder, and we're working to kind of move more people over to the bidding side. And it took a little bit of experimentation to figure out with the new setup how all of our floors would change. So we had maybe something like 40 or so floors in our original waterfall, as well as some that were kind of like at the bottom of our waterfall that were automated. And then we had to do a lot of experimentation to figure out what the actual optimal setup was and find whatever blind spots we may have had before.
Okay. Yeah, so I mean, it sounds like simply from switching to in-app bidding, you have some of these benefits that aren't necessarily performance related. You mentioned maybe you aren't, managing as many line items now. So John, I want to bring you in to kind of get your take on, what are some of these ways that simply switching from solely a traditional waterfall to in-app bidding can help your team out, not necessarily from revenue or performance, but in general?
Yeah, two big things come to mind. One is that simplicity of operation. We had over 2,500 line items across our apps, and we've cut that in half. With the move to bidding, and expect more to go as well. It makes it really easy to test new networks that are bidding. We can easily plug them in and see what kind of impact there is. And I guess lastly, it really simplifies the conversation with the ad networks. We test things. We'll try things in our waterfall. And part of that is just having a good setup with the networks where everything is either bidding or fixed line item. It's all about testing. There's no more of this negotiating over first fill and those type of things. Let's just see what you do.
Right. Yeah. I guess going from 2,500 line items down to 1,250 is a significant decrease there.
Yes.
Nate, Farhan, would you say you've seen similar benefits in terms of just optimizing your process for managing all this stuff?
Yeah, I think for the fact that the technology's been coming in, you also have to test it up against multiple line items, see if it works well as a solution, because sometimes the tech not being where it should be means that you kind of need to see if the real-time bidder is kind of a better solution to having multiple line items. But generally what we've seen, it does tend to work well. It depends on the situation and kind of geo and all that. But in general, the management is a lot easier. You don't have to negotiate kind of where to put those instances, those floors, and kind of you can rely more on the bidder and get positive results with less management.
Right. And I imagine, you guys know me, I'm from HyprMX, we're an ad network. You love talking to me all the time, I'm sure, but a little bit less communication with each ad network, especially when you're running multiple demand sources, is definitely a good thing. So I want to take it here next. There are a lot of solutions, right? We've got AppLevin-Max, we've got IronSource Level Play, which I know you guys are using. Do any of you have sort of a favorite feature or capability of the particular system you're using?
Yeah, just to jump in, the A/B testing was a game changer for us. We always use that in our product side of the business. A/B testing every feature we do pretty much. But that was really lacking in the network side. It was a bit of maybe not a total guessing game, but it was hard to know what the impact of adding in a network actually did to your waterfall. You can measure the top line, but that's hard sequentially. So now it makes it really easy to put a new network in on one side, the A/B test, and just see which one actually has better ARPDAL, or to change up the waterfall on one side, et cetera. It really makes that a lot easier to make data-driven decisions.
Yeah, I think for us too, A/B testing was super big. I think a big part of it is not just having A/B testing, but I think it's important that the A/B testing is relatively easy to use, so that it's not difficult to add those networks or to duplicate line items, which it can be in some cases. So having that, and then knowing kind of what to look for in our analytics once we are A/B testing was also super helpful. So having access to see the number of impressions per user and things like this line up directly in the analytics that we're getting from the A/B testing made it so that we could act a little bit faster.
Okay. Yeah, that was sort of my next question was, what is the data transparency like? What sort of information are you getting? And is it more or less than, compared to traditional mediation? Anybody can jump in on that one.
For us, it's pretty similar. I mean, the bidding, we mostly let it run. We occasionally check and audit, but that seems to work well. And I assume all the systems have really good reporting. I know Max makes it really easy to see, where we have issues in the waterfall, both A/B testing and also if maybe a line item isn't delivering what it says it should be, et cetera. All that's become a lot easier. I know the networks love it because they get these loss reports, so if they're processing that, they know exactly what our waterfall looks like and, what it takes to win.
Right.
So I don't, once again, get all those questions about, what our waterfall looks like.
Similar,
that's information for you to provide. Go ahead, Farhan.
Yeah, similarly, I don't think there's much difference in reporting. In fact, you don't have unused line items, which could cause potential latency or other issues. And also fill rate kind of should be better, in fact, than having instances because, the kind of bidder works things out. So I don't see any huge differences in reporting, and I'm basically agreeing with what the other two said.
That's a good point that I actually hadn't thought of, like in terms of fill rate. Is that something, John, Nate, that you've seen as well? I mean, fill rate is fairly decent when you're using the in-app bidding portion of your waterfalls?
Yeah, the fill rate has improved. I think another reason for that is just the lower latency. So because we're not, we don't have to run through 100 different line items and something will get filled relatively quickly, we're able to serve more ads on average per user, which is a big part of what's successful for us. If I can just add, in terms of transparency, I think there are probably still some things out there that would be nice to have. Mm-hmm. For instance, it's the same sort of data that I think would be nice to have also just for the waterfalls. A good example of this would be things related to the installs, more on like the attribution side. So, if we are testing specific networks and we want to make sure that they're, say, playing by the rules, it would be helpful to have more data that we're exposed to about, who's claiming clicks, who's claiming installs, so that we could potentially identify if there's, any sort of issues or discrepancies between networks.
And you also want to see if your mediator is biased, which always does seem to be the case with all mediators, where you use whoever you're using seems to have an unnaturally high amount of impression count compared to the other networks. So that kind of stuff, it's hard to get full validity in the reporting. And even into the terms of targeted and non-targeted advertising, it can be pretty difficult. And some networks have a big discrepancy in the ECPMs, so you can't really see who your data sources are that well.
And you factor the data that you're getting in. Obviously, the more data, the more transparency, the better to make those decisions. And it kind of combines, it brings the UA teams and the monetization teams together. So you've got UA and monetization perhaps working more closely. You've got more time freed up because you're managing less line items. John, at PeopleFun, do you find that your different departments like user acquisition and monetization are having to talk more or less now that you've started using in-app bidding?
Maybe more, but more so it's just, we have them very integrated. They each knows exactly what's going on the other side. And some of that's maybe not so much in-app bidding, but now that we have ad revenue at the user level, that's huge for us. Since all of our apps, the majority of the revenue comes from ad revenue, so that's really critical to be able to effectively measure ROAS. And we definitely want to know, when there's changes, when we do something on the monetization side that we think can either do it, lead to a big change, or when we do see where drops occur for various reasons on the monetization side, and all that can impact UA. So yeah, we pretty much have them kind of live together.
And that leads me sort of to, I think, a question that is everyone's wonder. It is one of those preconceived notions. So this is open to all of you guys. Have you seen revenue lift or increase in ARPDAU since you've been adding in-app bidding?
Yeah, I mean, overall, yes. We would see it really varies by country and platform. So there are definitely some instances or cases where it's dipped, but also some cases, in the majority of which it's increased by anywhere from 5 to 20%. 20% is more rare, 5% is more likely. And I think a big part of that has been because we can show more ads per user when they're making requests. Our ads are only opt-in. It's only rewarded video. So we want to show them as many ads as they'd like to ask for. So that's been a big part of it. Also, I think, we've been able to get, as I mentioned from the beginning, a little bit more networks and been able to kind of close the gaps between where we previously had floors that, maybe actually didn't make any sense.
Yeah, for us, it might be hard to separate. We moved to Max a while back, and we did see like a 10 to 25% lift there, but that included both going to more bidding, but we also just saw an overall increase in impressions per DAU. So for us, it was like a 10 to 25% jump, but it may have been a combination of factors there.
Okay.
Yeah, and just to confirm that, like it's the competition isn't one of the major elements. So just turning a bidder on in Canada for one network and leaving everything else on default isn't going to work out too well. So like combining the bidder with multiple instances for other networks tends to be what works well. And obviously the higher ECPMs and the higher fill rate kind of increases ARPDAUs. And so that's kind of, I think, why it works. But I still think the tech's getting there, and we should see hopefully better results. Unless iOS 14 comes and damages that all, which I think is your next question, right, Eric?
Great segue, Farhan. Man, it's as if you knew what the questions were.
No way.
That's exactly right. I mean, the elephant in the room, iOS 14, obviously I think there's been a bit of a sigh of relief in some instances because the impact to IDFA is going to be a bit delayed, but inevitably iOS 14 will be rolling out. And I would love to just get kind of the round panel take on what do we think is going to happen. I know there are a million things that could. It's sort of a guessing game, but particularly, what do we think is going to happen with in-app bidding as it rolls out?
I talked to you a bit about it before a couple of weeks ago, but yeah, I mean, iOS 14 or the deprecation of IDFA being delayed till the start of next year is obviously giving the industry some more time, and a lot of us are looking into like how new flows could kind of get users to at least opt in to be getting targeted advertising. So that's what a lot of the developers are kind of testing to see what the impacts will be. Very hard at this moment still to predict what the kind of drops would be there, but there definitely will be some perceived impact on the industry. Whether it's a long term or not, it's kind of hard to tell. But you should expect from early next year some impact on your iOS ad revenue, and that is going to make it hard for many businesses which are kind of relying on ad revenue for their titles. But then, yeah, and the UA side is obviously going to be impacted through that as well. But yeah, it remains to be seen, I guess, what happens at exactly what date the iOS 14 push actually happens on.
Right. And John, did you have anything to add there?
Yeah, I think that covered a lot of it. There's definite uncertainty. We're all going to figure this out. We'll certainly do things to maximize consent, and user opt-in, but that's really an industry-wide issue. For that to work, everybody needs to get consent at a reasonable level. For us, one specific thing we're looking at with Max is, we'll be testing LAT only waterfalls. So for those users who do go the LAT route, we'll put them probably in their own waterfall and just have it set up and optimized for that, or at least we'll be testing that.
And Nate, you're going last, so I assume you've got everything figured out and you're going to just give us the silver bullet.
Oh yeah, I've looked into my crystal ball, and I can say that we have uncertainty in our future. I think the LAT specific waterfalls are going to be a part of our strategy too. And I think actually just going back to the waterfalls, we're going to have to spend a little bit more time than once the new features released in iOS 14 and rolled out to all users. We're going to spend a significant amount of time going back and looking at the waterfall to ensure that if there are massive changes, that we're prepared for them. So a good example of this, just more concretely, would be if we've kind of abandoned all of the lower positions in our waterfall because we don't really need them anymore right now, and the bidders are taking care of things there, and we're getting, you know, for the few networks that are still on the waterfall, more hits at a higher position. We could see a big problem if we don't adjust that, and users or advertisers start bidding at lower rates right when this change happens with iOS 14. So this could be huge, and we could suddenly be missing out on large chunks of revenue because we haven't optimized that, you know, bottom
Right.
waterfall. We'll be keeping a close eye on it.
Makes sense. Yeah. So it's not all doom and gloom. I think we all have the benefit of being in one of the industries where there are many extremely smart people. Things will be figured out. I want to thank everyone for joining me today, and I want to maybe throw it to Rick to see if we have any questions from the audience.
We have a lot of questions. Thank you very much to the panel. So yeah, we've got quite a few. We've got some time for the next panel, so let's dig into some of these. One that really caught my eye is this from an anonymous attendee. Indies have low UA budgets. We get only one shot at getting positive ROI, or else we need to do a job. I assume that means get a different job. What are your minimum number of impressions needed to test ad monetization metrics like ARPDAU, fill rates, etc.? I'll open that to anybody who wants to jump in.
Anybody?
Anybody? Even you, Eric, you can go in.
I don't think I'm going to have the expertise needed for that one.
It's actually a good question. I'd say, I don't know off the top of my head, but like generally, I'd say a few thousand DAUs what you tend to be wanting to look at, right? So with indies, UA budget can be tough, and even getting to a few thousand kind of DAU, you might have to spend tens or even hundreds of thousands of dollars. But yeah, you need statistically significant data for that. And ideally, a few thousand DAU would kind of present that for you. But yeah, like if you have a couple hundred DAUs, it's going to be really tough to kind of work out if your ARPDAU is on par with what it should be.
And I'd also add, to confound that problem even more, is that a lot of networks are going to have they're going to have minimums for whether or not they even show ads at a certain DAU level or impression rate. And sometimes mediators will have these minimums, which will make it more difficult. There's also like a learning period when you first launch your game. So you might see that, you know, within the first couple days, you're getting really good CPMs, and then like a month later, it like levels out. And that's not necessarily like your fault or the data's fault. It's just the algorithms are adjusting. Advertisers might be adjusting to your traffic. Suddenly you have this great breakout hit, and they're like, oh, these users, you know, maybe they don't think the users are great in the beginning, and then they realize they are incredible. That, you know, they might turn up their bids to try and get more traffic there.
Yeah. So Nate, what you're saying, right, is that you cannot easily do profitable UA or work out what your ARPDAU is on ad revenue based games, right? It's easier to focus on kind of LTV titles unless you've you want to acquire a significant amount of users, right? So it's a tough one for the indies of focusing on ad revenue.
Yeah, especially in the beginning.
Cool. I've got another question which looks interesting from somebody who's asking, what advice would you give to developers who haven't started testing in-app bidding yet? So I guess, like, you know, if you're just getting into it, what would be the starting point? How would you get started with it all?
Mine would be just do it. You know, if you were putting out a new app now, I don't know why you wouldn't use all the in-app bidding in it that was available. It's just easier, you know, simpler to set up. I think, you know, it's going to be at least as good from what we've seen, and just lower maintenance.
Cool. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense to me, in the form that the more tools we have, the better. And I mean, we hear this all the time from our partners. Every game is different. Every platform and every game. I think in-app bidding working in a particular manner in one title doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be your go-to for another. But like John said, if you can have all of these tools in your toolbox and have the ability to A/B test and to get the right balance. Obviously, I think that's going to be the optimal setup.
Farhan, you saying something, or is that answered what you were going to say?
No, I was just saying I agree with John. Like, you know, the industry's moving there. It's gonna get you better results overall. But like, yeah, if you're a smaller app, you may not even have time to look at that. You may just run on you know, default. But yeah, getting the top level solution in the market, it's obviously the way you should go with it as soon as you can. So if the industry's moving there, better to get on the track.
Cool. We've got a question from Sai, who's asking, is it possible to get impression level data in-app bidding? You may have already said this, but it's a lot for me to take in, so I will throw it out there as well.
It varies by network. You know, Facebook has to date not allowed that, though they are working on a solution, you know, that we're kind of doing a beta with, where a approximate value per user can be set up that will be good enough for UA. So it depends. For us, we've seen it depends on the network.
Cool. We've got one here from an anonymous attendee who's asking, as you need to push the bidders into a hybrid system, what are the indications you look for to understand when you're not pushing the bidders enough? Does that make sense to everybody?
The only thing I can say is that if you're not pushing the bidders enough, it's a tough one. But if, for example, if you could be pushing too much and having some of the instances that are not doing anything. So it's kind of like you have to have a good with the floors. You have to have some gap there, and each one of the floors needs to be showing a lot of impressions for you. Otherwise, you could go further. And also, if you have a floor $8 and actually the real ECPM is higher, it also is an indication that you could be changing it. But Nate and John probably have more advice on that as well.
Yeah, definitely. As you know, it's one of those things. As you get more impressions, get more of those EAU, you want to spend more time on your waterfall setup. You know, you want in your hybrid, you want multiple line items per network for those that aren't doing bidding, and you know, you might even want to test bidding against waterfall, as Farhan mentioned, for some networks. But for us, you know, we're always testing, and with new apps as well. You know, testing the waterfall is just a daily activity. You know, and for us, it's a big effort. But even for smaller startups, you can make a huge difference in tuning that waterfall and making sure it's set up in a good way.
Cool, great. We're pushing up against time now, so I am going to just call it there so we can get started with the next panel. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. It was a really interesting discussion. And yeah, thank you very much for everybody for asking questions and stuff like that. So
Absolutely. Thank you.
A small round of applause from me.